Hi, this is Susan Spitzer speaking, and this is a very informal presentation of of actually an incomplete presentation. So all of these slides in this presentation are not complete, and the audio that you're listening to is just meant to be for preliminary purposes and not for final viewing. So the reason I started doing this presentation is because I've been requested from multiple sources to speak about coping with a debilitating chronic illness. And so this is how I go about doing that. And so I'm going to go through it very, very brief, as briefly as possible. Right now there are 52 slides, and I hope that there won't be any more. So at first I talk about case studies and I describe what a case study is. And the reason for that is because basically this whole presentation is from the case perspective. It is not really any controlled information, but I just give a little brief synopsis there about confidence in information up the pyramid of control from starting from really very basic research all the way up to meta-analysis where it compares multiple published studies together. The point of it is that this is not very controlled information that's being presented. So we present Susan S., that's myself, as a case. And this is a very old picture of myself. And I start out by talking about where I was born and how I graduated high school, I got married, I went to college. I talk about my master's and PhD, about having a child, about postdoctoral fellowship, about being an instructor, about moving up the lines at the university that I was affiliated with. And then in 2004, oh no, I actually did some more work. Was a statistical programming advisor and did more stuff. And then in 2004, at the age of 44, I had to stop working very abruptly and very dramatically because I developed complications from a genetic disorder that I never knew I had called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And just a word about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Medical students typically are taught while they're in medical school that when you hear hoofbeats to think of horses, not zebras, meaning that you should look at the obvious answer and not go and look for the very rare answer. But with things like Ehlers-Danlos, when you hear hoofbeats, you should be thinking of zebras and not horses. And I think that's part of the complaints of the Ehlers-Danlos community, who refer to themselves as zebras and is the mascot of the Ehlers-Danlos National Foundation. And that is that we too, the medical community too often just looks at the obvious and doesn't look for these rare things. They're steered away from it. So I talk about the general characteristics of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome a little bit and all of the problems that come along with it, which make life very, very difficult. Then I go back into sort of more normal stuff and I talk about moving to North Carolina and how at that point I started to blog from bed because I was mostly stuck in bed. And the reason I was stuck in bed was because I had lost so much connective tissue between my head and my neck that my brains were falling out the base of my skull. So I used to refer to it as my brains being in my butt, hence the name of my blog, mybrainsareInMyButt.net. Also during from some of that time when I first moved to North Carolina, I facilitated a local support network for people with chronic illness, and I did this primarily from bed, although I held local, open houses and discussion groups and such. And there were about 80 or 90 members, and it was called Chronic Connections of Durham Chapel Hill, and it had a strong impact on a lot of relationships. But I finally had to stop doing it in 2013 when I basically became bedridden from two droopy brains. And in 2014, actually, it was like 2010 through 14 when I was completely bedridden. But then in 2014, I underwent an innovative procedure to fuse my um, skull to my spine in such a way where I was able to be upright again. And so I was released from bed to undergo 6 additional brain surgeries the next year. And then more recently, I developed a major complication to Ehlers-Danlos, and that's called Derkham's disease. Now, a word about Derkham's disease. I said, when you hear hoofbeats, think zebras, not horses. It's even more rare than Ehlers-Danlos is, and basically it involves development of many benign lipomas or fatty tumors throughout the body, and the impact on my longevity is uncertain, but my quality of life is definitely affected. And there's mostly my quality of life is poor without having to work it very hard to not be poor. But throughout all of this, and I'm not sure where this is going to go now, but starting in 2005, I was very passionate about recumbent road cycling. And during ambulatory times, I always take advantage of that. And right now, I'm benched, and we're not certain if I'm going to be able to resume doing that. I certainly hope so, because it brought me a lot of joy. The other thing that brings me a lot of joy, which I am able to do in bed, is digital art. And I'm self-taught in that, and there's a whole free world of education on the internet I've discovered. And if you are adventurous enough, you can train yourself to do just about anything. Now, the with illnesses, it can be viewed as two categories: acute and chronic. And with acute illness, it only lasts for a set period of time, and chronic illness, it can last for a lifetime. And then I go on to explain the contrast the differences between acute and chronic illness. Then in the next slide, I give examples of acute and chronic illnesses so that people have an understanding of what we're talking about. Now, debilitating chronic illness can cause many losses and add new challenges. For instance, it can affect career, income. I go on to explain the general things that it can have an impact on. And then I go on to taking a look at the case of Susan S., specifically how my illness had affected me and what it had robbed and the losses I had. It's all about loss with these illnesses. Now, how we cope with our losses defines whether we succumb to the illness versus survive the illness versus thrive in changed life. And sometimes it can be very, very challenging to thrive within the context of a debilitating chronic illness. I'll take the case of Susan S. She proposes 3 strategies for coping with chronic illness, debilitating chronic illness. When I say chronic illness, I'm going to be referring to the debilitating, not something like chronic high blood pressure or anything like that. So the coping strategy number 1, from the viewpoint of the case of Susan S., is to change your expectations to meet your current abilities. And I refer to the spoon theory. And this is a wonderful essay written by a woman that, and it's published on the internet, but I play this video here.
My best friend and I were in the diner talking as I went to take some of my medicine with a snack.
And this movie
Sad.
that I'll play,
Sad, maybe.
Which lasts, I'm not sure how long it lasts. Oops. It lasts 6 minutes. Goes through and they basically recite this essay called The Spoon Theory. And the summary at the end is basically you only have so many spoons to spend in a day. So you need to portion them appropriately. Now, then I go on with another video that I made, which is how many spoons does it take? And it shows what it looks like to, in my bedroom when I've had a flare-up of my illness. And I do this to sort of bring a certain comfort level, and I'm just streaming through pretty quickly. This is, again, I think it's about a 4-minute, and it shows my room. And a lot of people get enjoyment out of that, because especially people who are dealing with similar illnesses, because it makes them feel less ashamed of the condition of their house and everything. So the conclusion to coping strategy number 1 is you can't give away what you don't have. Now, coping strategy number 2 is managing changing relationships. Relationships change like crazy in the face of chronic illness. Isolation becomes a major factor. And the world, according to Susan S., is made up of 2 types of people. We have wellos on the left, which is well people, and sickos on the right, which is sick people. And we could go through this little dialogue that they go through where the wello says, "Oh no, there's that sicko. I don't know what to say. Guess I'll walk the other way." And the sicko says, "Why did that wello turn away from me? Maybe I did something offensive." And then another exchange might be the sicko saying, "I wish that wello wouldn't say such stupid things to me like, 'How are you feeling?'" And the wello's saying, "I don't know what the sicko wants from me." These are typical exchanges, or thoughts at least, that go on. The sicko would say, "I heard that everyone went out for dinner. Why didn't you guys call me like usual?" And the wello responds, "We figured you wouldn't be up for our usual Sunday night dinner." And the sicko thinks to herself, "That sure was mean. I guess they don't want me around." And you can see the loops that play in people's head. "Hi, sicko, I heard you've been sick. Let me know if there is anything I can do for you. Can you help me set my table so I can make dinner for my family like I used to?" And the wello thinks that would be so uncomfortable. Just ways of viewing what goes on. Now, in managing changing relationships, the first thing to do is identify your social network. And Susan S. views it as first close family, and then close friends, general family, general friends, acquaintances, and strangers. And the issue is, say you only have 20 spoons And you have to work on these relationships in order to make them work, especially in the face of chronic illness. How many spoons out of your 20 do you allot to each of those groups of people? And this is what Susan S. says. For close family, you allot 40% of your spoons. Close friends, 30%. General family, 10%. General friends, 10%. Acquaintances, 5%. And even strangers should get 5% because sometimes you never know what a stranger has to offer you. Not worth putting a lot of energy, but certainly worth listening. Now, continuing on with coping strategy number 2, with managing changing relationships, it's important to know that it's not just for the quality of life. It also can affect your physical well-being. Social relationships, physical health, and mental health are all interrelated and all impact each other. I go on to explain how the influence of social situations affects blood pressure, and this is a study that I actually published many years ago, and we basically show that when with family, blood pressure is average, 125/80. And with strangers, and this is after controlling for posture, for talking, for everything's all the same. Blood pressure goes up dramatically. It goes up to 138/87. So basically, like 10 points for in the difference with being with family and strangers. And this is just an illustration of how your social situation does affect your physiology and can in turn affect your health. There was a study done, it was actually a meta-analysis, and I really liked it because I really like meta-analyses because they really pulled together information. This one pulled together information from 60 published manuscripts from scientific journals. And basically, it shows that social relationship affects health behaviors and psychological processes, and that in turn will affect the physiological processes and then the physical health. And the conclusion for strategy 2 is to develop a social network for longevity and quality of life. Coping strategy number 3 is to think outside of the box. Pain management is the first issue I deal with, and the first thing and the most powerful thing to do to manage pain is to use distraction, and Susan S. does this about 90% of the time. Good distraction techniques would have to not be stressful. They would have to avoid emotional triggers. And I go on to explain all the characteristics of activities that would be good distractors for pain. And then I get very specific about the distractors I use, which would be digital art or to design spreadsheets and flow charts and slide presentations, because these are familiar to me because I did them a lot while I was working. Just to sometimes breeze through emails or Facebook, or I have this one Barbara Streisand video that I watch over and over again. I know it really well, so it's a really good distractor. Another technique is soothing. A touch from a safe person can be very soothing. And then I want to talk about a little bit about how sometimes people with debilitating illnesses can be a little skittish about touch because of the procedures that they've been through, which is why I say touch from a safe person. Massage therapists are one possibility. Another form of soothing is iPad apps, and I intend to have a little mini video there of an iPad app that does soothing. And then I also talk about touch from Samantha and Maxine, and I have a video with one of my snakes. I don't know if it's Samantha or oh, it's Samantha, and show how the snake soothes me.
And when I tried to wake her up, she got angry with me and licked me off.
Then I go in to talk about pain management in terms of, let me see, this is where it gets a little choppy. Oh, I talk about the recumbent road cycling and how that helps with pain management. And I also have a little video. I'm going to shorten some of these videos, they're a little bit too long. Then we'll talk about thinking outside of the box and how to use computers for pain management and loneliness. And I go in to discuss the the advantages of using a computer, although there is a learning curve to it. I talk about thinking outside of the box with how to set up recumbent uh, computer stations in order to be able to accommodate for not being able to sit up at a computer table. And I taught, first I showed a, $6,000 version, then I showed a version for a couple $100 that I rigged up myself. And then the really cheapo version, which is something that you can just use in bed. It's more like a little a table that just lifts a little bit so that you can have better access to your laptop. But then I talk about iPads. I love iPads for pain management. It also has a lot of similarities to using a computer, but it's an easier learning curve, and it's also less cumbersome to use with fewer complications than a computer. There, I talk about iPad stands, and there's a little bit more photos and ideas I want to show about how to use an iPad when you're really stuck laying down in bed all the time. And then I also talk about, and I'll have a little video here, my ingenious Velcro headboard that I have where in my bed, and I'll have pictures or video with it that will show that all you have to do is put little Velcros on the back of all your remote controls and all your little toys and stuff and stick them up on your headboard, and they're there for you. And the conclusion for for coping strategy number 3 is don't wait for someone else to come up with the ideas to address obstacles. You have to rely on yourself and think out of the box to solve your problems. Okay. And then I just have a little closing thought there. And that's it. That's my talk. So that was about 20 minutes. I would expect that in real life it would take 45 to 55 minutes to do. And thanks for listening.